friends, welcome back to the Craftomatics channel. Today I am working on a veil, and what I'm going to show you right now is how to attach a lace applique to the veil so that it looks really nice from a distance, because remember, nobody's going to be looking super closely at your veil, so it's totally fine to have a little bit of that. It's going to blend right in. So I am using this kind of nice lace applique that comes on a roll from Joann's. So I think I ordered about 2 yards, and it is just interspersed around the veil in a pattern that the bride has already okayed. So I'm just stitching everything into place, and you can see this is a common problem. There's a lot of beads on here and they like to fall off. So at least one of these beads does need to be reattached. So I've got my thread. It is double just for a little bit of strength. But since we are working on a veil, veils aren't really heavy use, so I'm going to be using a running back stitch. So I'm just going to come up in an area that is nice and covered so you won't see the knot. So I'm going to come up over here with my thread, and I'm just going to lock it in by doing that stitch one more time. And what I'm going to do is do a running back stitch all the way around the outside. So what that means is I'm going to go like I'm basting a running stitch, and then here and there I'm just going to kind of repeat one, and that's a back stitch. Because this lace has a lot of these sort of applique bumps, I like to sort of tack them into place, so they are how I'm deciding where to do my back stitches. As I'm going around, so here I can see I've got a pearl, and this one is pretty secure, it's not pulling away, so I'm going to leave that one alone. One trick with when you're using really long thread, which for me I use about a double arm's length, is just to hold it in place with your other thumb when you pull like this, and that helps keep it from getting tangled. Most of the time, since we're working tulle onto tulle, that's not really going to be necessary, but when you're working through some of these spaces are kind of tight and have a lot of thread on top of the lace, that's like right here, or sequins or anything like that, the thread does like to tangle. So you can always just back it up a little bit and then just use your finger to hold it in place while you pull with your other hand. And that helps prevent it from tangling. Because I'm working with tulle on tulle, my straight pins don't always want to stay in place, and that's part of why I'm working on what's called a tailor's ham. And a tailor's ham, it's called that because it's kind of shaped like a ham, but all it is it's sort of like a very densely stuffed pillow. Mine is stuffed with fabric scraps, but traditionally they would also be stuffed with sawdust or horsehair, or fabric scraps work really well too. They are extremely useful for ironing around a curve, and also for a lot of hand stitching like this, because it does prevent you from needing to hunch over too much. So I am working on a tailor's ham right now because it gives me that background color so I can see what I'm doing, and also so that I don't have to crane my neck quite as much. So at this point I can see this pearl is trying really hard to come away, so I'm back stitching, but I'm just going to come up underneath where that purl is. And I'll go through it. And then back down into the fabric and right back over to where I was doing my other stitching. Oops, and it's going to try real hard to get stuck on my pins. That's okay. There we go. So anyway, if my pins come undone, not a big deal. Lay it out flat on the tailor's ham, make sure that nothing's bunching up, and just pin it back in place. And if you don't have a tailor's ham, you could use your lap, which is a historical solution to that problem. Just be careful not to sew anything to your own clothing. Or you can also just use a table. The only problem with using a table is that it's not round, and it can make it very easy to cause some accidents and really crane your neck a lot, which you don't want to do. Because if you're doing a lot of hand sewing, which on this veil there's you know, about 2.5 yards of lace, which is quite a lot to be stitching by hand in one sitting, you want to make sure that you aren't holding the same position for too long, because you will get some neck issues from that. I'm just about caught up to where this pin is going, so I'm going to take that out. You also have issues like this, so you can see because of the way that this lace was, and I cut it right here, it was attached to another piece. So you can see I've got these two pieces of this cord that are now separated. So what I'm going to do is just kind of tack them into place. So even though they're fraying, that's okay. Remember, it's, you know, it's a veil. Nobody's going to be touching it a whole lot. So I'm not worried about them continuing to fray. I just don't want them to be affected too much by gravity and start to come off. So like this one's trying to peel back, and then it wouldn't look like a flower anymore. So just very carefully whip stitch them into place. There we go. And I'll probably hit that with a little bit of fray check later, just to make sure that it really doesn't go anywhere. The other thing with veils, remember, it's almost like in stage costume, call it the 50-foot rule, which is the distance of the stage to the first row of seats. So if you can't see it from the first row of seats, you know, there's no point in doing it. And similarly, if you can't see it from the first row of seats, it doesn't matter if you made a mistake. Veils are kind of similar because nobody's going to get that close to the bride's veil unless they are really looking very closely, which is uncommon. And also remember that most of the time after the ceremony, the bride's going to go and take photos while wearing the veil, and then after that, it just comes off and is not worn for most of the reception. So really, the veil, you're only going to be able to see what you can see from that first row of chairs during the ceremony. So if you hang the veil about 10 feet away from yourself and you can't see the mistake, or you can't see that little bit of frayed cording, or you can't see these threads around the applique, then it's fine. Now that I am coming around to see again, my pins are trying to come off. That's okay. I just want to make sure that this piece underneath isn't bunching up, because I don't want to create any permanent wrinkles. So that's what I'm doing with my left hand, is just making sure that it is smooth and in place underneath the applique. Another thing you may notice is that I have a thimble here on my on my right middle finger. I always recommend sewing with a thimble if you're going to be working by hand. And it is a bit of an adjustment. Metal thimbles are more common. That's what you'll see sold in stores. I really like a leather thimble. It's much more comfortable. It will shape itself to your finger and do you the favor of staying on very well, because it's easier to just make one yourself and then you know it's the right size. Where metal thimbles, especially if you have small hands like I do, metal thimbles are made for different size fingers, but most of the time in the store there's only one size. So if you have hands that are outside of what might be considered an average, small or large, the thimble is probably not going to fit you correctly. So in my case, they never stay on. If you have larger hands, you might not even be able to get it onto your finger. So I like a leather thimble, and really all it's doing is preventing my fingers from getting poked from the back of the needle, which when you're using a very small needle, which I am right now because this is pretty delicate work, the back of the needle can be just as stabby as the front sometimes. So now I'm around to where this pearl was supposed to be. You can see there's a thread here. That's where the pearl is supposed to go. So I'm going to trim this, not quite all the way up, but most of the way off. And just in part of my stitching, I'm going to come up where it's supposed to be. Oh, it's trying to make a knot. Don't do that. There we go. And I will grab that pearl, which has also tried to run away. And stitch it in. See, I'm just about out of thread, which is okay because I'm just about at the end here. Let's see where I started. I started about over here. I've got just enough, I think I'm gonna make it. And if I didn't have enough, that's okay. I would just try and hide the knot underneath a piece like this that has a lot of thread so you wouldn't be able to see it. And that's about where I started, so I want to make sure that I'm going down underneath. Now I'm ready to tie it off. So I'm not cool. I can just make it, I think, once. I like to tie 3 knots at the end. This is very delicate work, so 2 is probably going to do the trick. I don't quite have enough thread there, but that's all right. So I'll just tie a knot like this instead. Trim the excess, and that's it. Now my applique is attached, so I will continue all the way around the veil to attach each piece of the applique until it's all finished. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope that you have learned something helpful and useful to you. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and remember to also check out the blog at www.craftomatics.com for more.